So, welcome back aboard the RV Falcor. Luckily for you, we decided not to do anything too interesting till you got here, but we have set you up beautifully that we are just at the north side of the Von Damm hydrothermal field. What you can just see in your view at the moment are a few shrimp, but what we can see on our looking ahead cameras, our lower quality cameras, are three different areas with crevasses with high concentrations of shrimp, so we know these must be areas of active fluid flow. These are sites we've never been to before, so we're going to be interested to know what kind of temperatures the fluid's coming out at. So what you can see right now is Casey, our expedition leader and pilot on watch for the first half of today's dive, just picking up the temperature sensor, part of the Chip-Briar super sampler. And we have Jeff in the back of the room. We're actually just going to have a quick explore and work out what kind of temperatures the fluid is coming out at where these shrimp are living. So we're not necessarily going to sample anything here. This is more for exploration's sake, and also to set up the dive later on to see if these are places that Julie Huber might be interested in sampling for microbiology later in the dive. Are you ready to measure temperatures, Casey?
I am.
Cool. So, looks like that's ahead of you about a meter or two to the right is the nearest of the sites we're going to go to.
Up and away, here it is.
Casey had both hours of sleep last night. He's way too lively today.
I'm more excited than shrimp in diffuse flow. That's Buster?
I think that, let's see. No, I think that's it. Let's stick the temperature probe in there and see. Can we switch to the zoom camera? Looks like they're actually living inside a little cave there. Can you see to that actually conduct the chemical reactions that actually fix the carbon dioxide from seawater, and that's what provides the nutrition to both the shrimp and their host, the bacteria that they host. So we can't immediately see any active fluid flow, but the trick we've learned is amongst all these cracks in these boulders, where the shrimp are clustering is almost certainly where the chemical energy is available. They're basically where the food is at, and where the food is in these environments is warm fluid with chemical reactions. So what I'm going to ask Casey is just basically in amongst wherever the shrimp are, that should be where the best signs are for there to be any fluid flow. It may only be about 10 degrees Celsius or so, but if we can stick our temperature probe in amongst the shrimp, that'll be the best target. Yeah, I think just in that vertical crack. Yep. And then down, I think if you go down and around to the left, there's a little overhang. Not sure if we can get in there, but can you see all the shrimp are clustered in under the rock? So if all the shrimp are in there, they're basically there because that should be where the chemical react. That's where the chemicals are going to be at. And what we don't know is what temperatures. We think it's probably only about 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. What do you measure as ambient temperature, Jeff?
We're getting about 4.8.
Okay. So this is our first sample number of the day, Leighton. This is a temperature. 4.8. Okay. What did you get to there, Jeff?
6.
So let's do a quick in that cluster that's up to the right if you can't go any further there. That's kind of confirming what we think. We can't see any really active shimmering flow or anything. And you're just poking amongst them, they'll swim out the way.
I can probably get in further here.
Mm-hmm.
7.
Yep. Okay. I'm happy that's not going to be... That's not in a range that was... Yep. 7.5. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, Casey, let's keep that in the hand. Can we just stay there and get about 30 seconds of video there while we hold? No, we'll just count as part of the temperature. That's fine. Thanks, Leighton.
We currently don't have control over the lens. So
You can try doing power cycling the camera.
let's do that one. See if I can get a little better focus.
Okay. I suppose, actually, to be consistent, we probably should give it a sample number for the video, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I feel like you get that.
Thank you.
Yes,
Fishes.
Fish.
Yep, it's coming out of the cave, look.
Oh, there he is. Fish. Nice to see him, actually. Oh. And there's an abundance of them. You didn't expect them. Not like they were too rustic, but you certainly get a lot of fish.
Are you getting response out of the camera for the focus?
No, we need to cycle the power. We can do that if we want, but right now there's no.
Should we try cycling the power and get ourselves set up for later in the cruise? So we're just going to turn the camera off and turn it back up again. We're trying to get the focus on that, but if you saw that little fish in the crevasse just now, it was busy opening and closing its mouth. Cindy rather macabrely had us putting our fingers in the mouths of one of those fish that we collected on Friday, just to feel how sharp its little teeth were. And it's like surprisingly like little razor sharp, kind of, don't know, probably like kitten teeth, something like that, if you've ever been nipped by a kitten. So there he is, the little fish right in the center there, the zoacid fish. Remember, the fish can see, the shrimp can't. And
How long is
we'll just see how they're going to go.
So we can do, it's still not coming with party.
Okay, so
we
let's,
can troubleshoot it or
no, let's just, if we could center up on that little fish in the cave, on the left. And let's hold there, and then when you, right, hold it there, and we will count 30 seconds. And we'll collect some footage here, just see how these animals behave, and then we'll move on to the next side and go and do some more temperature measurements. So that's 12, 28, and 30 seconds. Leighton spoiling for a fight here. Looking to see a fish shrimp smackdown. He may just be deciding he's defending his cave against us and thinks we're being aggressive, you know.
What sort of family is this from?
I don't know. I know they're called Oases, but I'm afraid I'm more of a geologist than a biologist. We can ask Cindy that one later on.
They're territorial.
I think so. What we did see yesterday when we were coming up to the main spire, you could see areas of bare rock where the fish was. Look, he's got his teeth. He thinks he's been sitting here too long taking this photograph and wants to move on. Okay, thank you, Casey. And that's the end of that little video sequence. Now let's move across to the next cluster of shrimp and see if we can find any warmer water there. The temperatures here were only about 7.5 degrees Celsius, 2 to 3 degrees warmer than we'd seen before. So we're switching back to our wide angle view. And we're going to bounce laterally across the seafloor. Not that I know.
Oh, potentially.
And
The lower
I think
one down there first, or-
no, I think we'll skip that because it didn't look. It's probably not any hotter than those other ones. But I think if we can come up here, as we approach, let's work our way across these things and see if we can find any active flow. If we can see shimmering flow in amongst the shrimp, that'll be a bit more interesting. If we could just the seafloor at home is at home to Mr. Nereus. What we can see here again is the whole thing got nudged a little by Nereus as we approached. In fact, we've opened up a little crack inside it. Can you see? On the underside, there's some, looks like white filament staining. So in fact, that might be interesting to check out what's the temperature on the underside of that boulder as well as in the hot crack above it. And it kind of, yeah, well, when you think all these boulders are probably, potentially have all just precipitated from this fluid flow. So it's, I think the dark patches are actually sort of where the sun isn't shining from our lights. But if there aren't any shrimp there and there's shrimp everywhere else, it may well be that it's just a little bit too hot. So this is going to be temperature station. This is sample station number 3, Leighton. New set of temperature recordings. We are on the north side of the Damm mound at a water depth of 2,304 meters. That'll still be 4.8, same as before. Okay, and are you measuring anything above that? No, 5.5 below the. Okay. Is it getting any warmer there? No. Okay. Okay, Casey, let's try above. Oh,
Six.
okay. Got up to 6 below the crack. That's not going to get us excited. Let's see above the crack where that active flow is. Can you get there without moving, or do we need to? So 60 degrees C below that boulder. And I think we're going to get much higher temperatures above, because you can see that there's a gap where the shrimp aren't congregating. And what we seem to know from when we came to the Von Damm Spire a year ago was that shrimp really don't like living at temperatures above 11 degrees Celsius. They like all the chemicals from the hot fluids. But we know in the extreme, the hottest fluids at this location are over 200 degrees Celsius. The most resilient microbial life we know can live at something in excess of 100 degrees, around 112 or so. Actually, I think the limit now must be up to, is it 121 degrees? The limits for microbial life that are known? 121, isn't it? Because Julie's always looking for 122 degree water, just in the hope that she might be able to find something that's surviving a little bit hotter. On the other hand, on days when we go and collect fluids in our sampler, it turns out they're 141 degrees Celsius. That's not so attractive to her, because that's almost certainly beyond the scope of any microbes we know. Well, it's certainly beyond the scope of any microbes we do know, and it's probably pushing the limits of our expectations that we'd actually find something new that was surviving at those temperatures. But I think if we could find fluids in the 100 to 120 degree sweet spot range, that probably is something that would make Julie happy. It's the one to the right with the dark gap. You can see that there's more over to the top left of the screen as well. We'll try those later, but Casey's just setting up for the first one. As with all things to do with ROVs, it's very easy for me to make the request. It's a whole other game to actually make the vehicle move in 3 dimensions at the seafloor and then get to a position where it can fit around the boulders to actually get to where I want to make the measurements.
Back to your map, you know about that.
Mm-hmm.
What area do you sort of see that map going in what temperature?
Based on the data we collected in the last 5 minutes, about 10 degrees Celsius. So I can answer specifically for that microbial mat. I think there's a whole range of temperatures, but into the tens of degrees. Clearly, I mean, I'm not sure what the deal is with the shrimp and their bacteria, whether it's the bacteria couldn't survive the temperatures even if the shrimp lived at warmer temperatures. But I think it's they're probably not that much different from living in a hot tub. So, you know, the 30 to 40 degrees, if you ask an Icelandic person, they can cope with slightly warmer temperatures in a hot tub than I can cope with. But it's in those kinds of ranges, you know, which is probably not that different from what we, find in the tropical ocean, the surface ocean. I mean, even here, these temperatures down here, even the warm fluids where these shrimp are living aren't as warm as the water that Nereus passed through this morning when we launched the vehicle. The difference tends to be less the temperature and more the chemical activity that's available that goes with that temperature. So I think we'll give this a new temperature since we did reposition ourselves. This will be sample 4, it's another temperature recording. And just switching to our zoomed in camera view so we can make sure we're taking the temperature right where we want to.
Oh, you can talk to it as long as you don't do anything to go away.
What do we have for temperatures there, Jeff?
4.7. Just go hovering.
Yep. No, just checking the, yeah, the ambient stuff. And you see in miniature down there, you can see just below the tip of the temperature probe, you can see dark rock with some white staining. That's actually what the view is like right inside the main orifice of the central spire of the Von Damm mound. Only there, instead of being a matter of inches across, it's about a metre across. We saw that yesterday. We may actually get back to see that at the end of today's dive if everything goes according to plan and we manage to keep on pace with all the other sampling that we want to do. Yeah, Leighton was just asking about the white markings. So when you see these, quite often when you look from above, you can see 3 white patches, one right in the center and one's to either side. The one in the center is the heat-sensitive patch that's connected to the same part of the brain as the eyes in a regular shrimp. And the pods to either side look like side pods. The white staining there, that's actually you're seeing through the translucent carapace and the white coloration are the bacteria that do all the chemical fixation. So we have temperatures up to 16 degrees Celsius. If you go into the clear area where the shrimp aren't, that might be hotter, down below. Yep. Are we getting any warmer in that hot area?
13. So 25.
And down. Just a little bit.
27. 34. 40. 41. Might be interesting to do it. 41 was the peak on that. 30.
So we have maximum temperatures here about 41 degrees. Should somebody wake Julie up, do we think? And
It's real easy to start pumping right now.
right, since we're set up, rather than go away and have to come and relocate this site.
Yeah, why not?
So we've measured these temperatures. We knew somewhere around 50. If we keep probing around in there, Casey, and see if we find any... Jeff, if you can keep monitoring temperatures. If we pan up... Was there another dark patch without any shrimp in it? Or can you reach any further in with the temperature probe there, or are we all fully extended?
I think it's hit something.
Can you see the little white mineral in the right off the end of your tip? Is it still in the 40s, Jeff?
40 right now. 42, 44, 46.
Then rotate down, maybe?
52, 3.
If we keep going at this rate, Jeff's going to get interested too. If you bring it all the way down so that the rod's resting against the shrimp. Hold it there. What do we have there?
That's 26.
Okay, let's come back up again. Stop there. How now?
31, 38, 43, 44,
So when we can just see the hose clamp is a pretty good sweet spot.
53, 55,
Should
60,
we try going a little to the left?
60, 57, 3,
How's that?
40,
Okay, let's scrooge back a little to the right very gently.
45,
I think right where it's in line with the white mineral is pretty... Are you still in the 40s there?
40, 41,
Can you nudge any further gently to the right?
38,
I haven't seen him, we just... Okay. This is steady in this patch here. It's like 50-degree fluids. Okay, let's wake Chip. No. Hey, Cliff, could you go wake Chip Briar for us, please? Oh, you're doing something. We're going to call Chip Briar. Unfortunately, that doesn't go to the tune of Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters are reserved exclusively for Jeff Seawald. Sure.
Did my log entry come through for my room?
I did not see it, sorry.
Oh. I said this might be a good spot.
Good. I was asking, should we wake Julie up? I was right. So just to let you know what's going on, we were on our way to some high temperature sites in this area that we knew existed, but I also knew from reviewing the video from when we were here before there were plenty of other lower temperature sites. So I'd said to Julie when we got here we would actually scope out various places wherever there was fluid flow and shrimp together. The first of these sites that we looked at was only around a few degrees, like less than 10 degrees Celsius, a few degrees above ambient. But this second site, where we actually found a gap which has water that's a little too hot for the shrimp to like, but it's right on the cusp of what they can tolerate, we measured the temperatures, and sure enough, they've come out with temperatures all above 40 degrees Celsius. I think the peak temperature we saw so far was 61, and I think the hot on Celsius. Is that right, Chip?
Really?
And we're stable right here in the 40s. Fine, we're going to do fluid sampling, so
Okay.
we're just approaching the Ginger Castle and White Castle sites.
Okay.
We're just downhill from the high temperature. There are, you can actually see in...
You don't want to try to nudge it, see if we get back to 60?
Well, we have been drifting ever so slightly.
So we can, but it's basically... There's a... If you see inside that hole, that little white, if we're actually lined up with the little white mineralogy, with the dark bits to either side, that's our hottest point.
Okay. So that's where you keep targeting and then it goes.
Yeah, so what's the temperature right now?
36, 40, 44,
And in terms of where we'll be able to sit for 30 minutes, if you want to take a good sample,
45.
I think you can definitely get above 40 and exactly what we can get.
Okay.
Do you want to try panning a little bit to the right, Casey? I think that might be the only thing we didn't try to get hotter.
Slowly starting to drift.
Okay, need to set the vehicle back up.
Vehicle drifting or the arm?
Vehicle. Both.
Okay, to the big zoom, I have to count 0 pounds, which means pins.
Okay, well, we're in a really good spot for sampling, so
Saying
when we're ready,
so
when we finish getting this sample, maybe we can give you a shout.
if I don't have time to do it.
No,
So there's-
well,
it all depends on priority.
So you can see while we were getting that temperature sensor and getting ourselves set up, the vehicle drifted off slightly, so Casey's just repositioning ourselves while Julie and Chip have been drinking sufficient coffee to get woken up and ready to get their samples. And indeed the temperatures are such that, as I was joking just now, if the temperatures get rising, Jeff might get interested in these, and Jeff and Jill are now deciding whether they might want to get a fluid temperature from this side as well. Not a bad start to the dive. Okay, so Casey's happy that he has the vehicle set up in a stable position again. Yikes. And that wasn't part of the plan. We'll just pick that sampler back up, and we'll be back with you very shortly. There we are. The Chief Scientist is now wide awake. And we're getting ready. I think ambient temperature here is about 4.8 degrees Celsius by this temperature probe. And we're just going to set up again to get ready to measure temperatures in this fluid. And once we make sure this time when we have the temperature probe in the right way and in the right temperature fluids that Julie's interested in, that's when we will switch to, we'll turn on the pumps and start collecting the microbial samples that Julie is interested in. The time is coming up to 8:55 here aboard ship, which is 5:55 on the west coast of the United States. Our time zone on the ship is the same as the east coast of the United States. So you have a nice zoomed in clear view now of the shrimp clustered around the rock. You can see outside of where the shrimp are. The shrimp are basically in the Goldilocks zone of a nice combination of temperature and chemical composition.
8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 6, 17.
Let's go
Acting
a
at
little left, please, Casey.
20, 25, 28, 29, 25,
And then stop there, and then if we can lift up a little bit or rotate
20.
out. Let's come back to the right again.
18, 20, 23, 24,
Can you reach any further in with the probe? Or is it
20, 23,
We go left again, now we're a bit further in. Still 30.
23.
Let's come back to the right again.
18, 20, 27, 30, 29, 28, 27, 25,
Okay, let's stop there. Let's go back to the left again.
10, 16, 15, 14,
Okay, let's stop the left-right move there. We're lifting out a little bit.
12, 16. Oh, yeah. 12,
So if we push down as far as we can reach in. So if the hose clamp disappears out behind the shrimp.
11, 10,
Okay, let's try lifting away again and be up against the back wall.
holding steady around 10, 13, 14, 15, 20, 23,
See like if we can get the hose clamp up against that white stuff, the white mineral, against the black.
26, 28,
That seems to be the hot spot.
32, that looks good, 35, 41, 45, that's it, 50, 52, 55,
Okay, let's try and hold it steady there if we can.
57, 58, that looks like a good spot,
Alright,
57.
you happy with 50?
A strange temperature for this place. 52, 50,
Okay, we're going to try and lock it in there.
so it's, well, dropping a lot. Hang on. We're down to 38, 36. Can you see where it is?
It's when we get the hose clamp against the little white patch of mineralogy that's surrounded by the dark grey mineralogy seems to be the golden spot.
We're at 44,
And it's about 2 millimeters across.
46. You got 55 though. No, not yet.
I think the sweet spot is very localized, Julie. It looks like it's like about the width of the tip of the snorkel. So I think we can, we'll get you temperatures that are mixtures of that stuff.
Yeah.
Actually hold it at 50 and above.
Well, it's at 50 right now. Yeah.
So we could probably, if you wanted a sample here, we might be able to get a whole water at 50, but the Sterovax might come out as an integration.
Well, they all do.
Do you want to go for that?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, which will the first port be when you're going to purge?
Number 1.
And you're going to purge first, Chip? Okay, and then if you can sing out when we start the sample. Thank you.
It's at about 42 right now. 53, 42, 40, 38. Are you having to hold the arm manually?
Well, we're drifting a little bit, so I'm trying to get it in there. I also can't see the sampler. Can you pan down a little bit?
We're at 25.
I think if you go down about the diameter of the hose clamp from there, Casey, it should be.
29.
Try to.
Just going to reposition, Julie.
It's hard because you can't see.
Mm. Do you want to come out to the wide camera?
Wide angle.
See if you can find a lot of shrimp with a shrimp-free hollow. Apparently that's the place to be. Because in fact what you can actually see inside, you see the dark mineralogy. You can actually see the bright white minerals in there as well, which are the same things we'd seen done at Picard, that when you can see white stuff that isn't life. Which is actually, look down inside the main orifice at Damm as well, you can see both dark and light minerals down below. I'd probably end up working in a Home Depot or something advertising paint colours, because it's different shades of white that I'm becoming quite an expert on.
You know the mineral mark?
No, I mean, ordinarily at conventional hydrothermal fields, in black smokers in basalt hosted systems, and you see a white mineral, you can be 98% confident just for the fact that it's white to think it's anhydrite. There's a calcium sulfate, but it can't be here, and it's chemically unstable. Because we have, it's a different host rock, we have ultramafic rocks, so that the chemical reactions that take place aren't the same, that the anhydrite gets most of its calcium from a mineral called plagioclase, and there just isn't much plagioclase in the mantle rocks that are being exposed, so it must be something else. We know at low temperature ultramafic hosted systems like the Lost City site, there are a lot of magnesium silicates and hydroxides, so there's a lot of other white minerals they can be, but the only way to really know would be to grab some out of there. So, we're back in the right spot for temperature zones. We're up into the 30s already. Casey has the hose clamp heading towards the white mineral in the center of the bottom of the image there.
35, 38, 40,
And as you can see, that
41,
hose clamp is less than a centimeter across, I think. And the difference is about the diameter of the tip of the hose. So if you go
33,
half a centimeter to either side, you drop about 10 degrees Celsius.
26,
Can you push just a little bit further in so that the tip is touching the...
4,
Well, when I touch it to the...
Then you push yourself off? Right. Okay, so you can't. That's a straight answer. Nereus is so delicately balanced that basically if you push even the slightest nudge against the wall, it just pushes away from the wall. I'm thinking, Julie, that's about as stable as you're going to get it.
okay,
The difference in temperatures...
42, 28,
The difference in temperature is about the width of the nozzle.
okay. Purging again? Okay, we're purging again.
Okay. Okay. Is the temperature holding up, Julie? We...
At 29, 28,
It'll lift up a little bit.
You pan right, Mario?
30,
Last night's, that's what we saw last night.
do you stop the clock there? No? Okay. Sorry.
I mean, I can try to hold it in one spot. The vehicle's moving now, so... Yeah, I can try to set up again, but if I touch the rock and push off, then we start sliding down to the two rocks I'm set up on.
Alright, maybe we shouldn't do this then.
Well, let's give one more go to set up.
Okay.
But I think the thing is probably not to go too much, Casey, after the hot spot. If we get the vehicle set up and then Casey just hovers and gets the temperature he can without touching the rock, then it should be able to stay stable.
I mean, the hotter ones are right next to it, but...
Right, so for the one of the extra 10 degrees, we can probably stay stable for... But that's going to be... Julie's going to want to do that for the order of 30 minutes or so, Casey.
Which is why I want to...
Is that feasible?
If we don't push off, yes.
Yeah.
But I think that may be just being happy with the lower
Yeah.
temperature.
Right. You don't have that infinite power all day just to drive yourself into the seafloor the whole time. So about that, Julie, we'll set up as best we can. We'll see what the temperature would be, and then we can make the decision then of whether that's worth getting or whether you'd rather
Okay.
save it for a different location. I think so. We're just setting up one more time to see how we can optimize the sampling. When we're taking samples for Julie, the filtration that takes place requires about 30 minutes of holding the vehicle in exactly the right place. And the trouble with this site is we know that there's a very localized flow of 60 degrees Celsius, which would be perfect for what Julie would like to do. But the downside of that is that since it's perched on a hillside, if we just touch that nozzle, which is only about a centimetre across, even gently against the rock that the fluid's flowing up against, it pushes the whole vehicle off balance. So it's perched on the hillside and it starts sliding downhill. If we start sliding downhill, then we can't stay in the same place to take the samples for 30 minutes, which is what Julie needs. So it's one of these tricky things of the only way to get the perfect sample involves a method that prevents us from getting the perfect sample.
Brought to you by the letter S, inspired by Eagles.
So we have a really nice view now of the larger area. You can see the dark patch that we're aiming for, where the temperature probe is headed. You can see it's different from the rest. You can see shrimp clustering, and basically the alignment of the shrimp kind of defines where the cracks are in the rocks all over the side of this hillside. And along some of those cracks you can see white discoloration. And basically, to a first approximation, you could probably guess at what the temperature distribution must be around these cracks. That the cracks that have rocks with no shrimp in them, chances are there's no fluid flow there at all. Then there are cracks with white lining, and if you can't see any shimmering flow, they're probably temperatures up to about 10 degrees Celsius compared to a background that's just below 5. I think 4.8 is the ambient temperature here, which is actually pretty much identical to what a domestic fridge would have. If you have a refrigerator in your house or apartment, then that's the kind of temperature of the water all around us that Nereus is sitting in. And then what we found is that directly in the front of us, and a little over to the left, that dark patch where there are no shrimp but surrounded by thick bodies of shrimp has temperatures up to about 60 degrees Celsius. So that's actually hotter than the hottest hot tub in there, which is why the shrimp choose not to be at those extremes of temperature. So what Casey's just been doing is trying to set the vehicle up somewhere where it'll be as steady as possible. So then as we switch to the zoom camera view now, we'll be able to look down into that dark hole, and then within that dark hole, somewhere, but it's very hard for us to pick out even with our zoomed camera, is the point where the hottest fluid is zooming out. And that's what we're trying to do. This silver snorkel we have is both a temperature sensor, and it has a fluid flow inlet which goes into the microbial sampler, the super sampler, at the back of our Nereus basket. So when we get the chance and we have the right temperatures, then we'll turn on the fluid flow and start drawing water through.
7, 8, 9, 11, 12.
Can you go left at all?
38. I don't think that was real. 13. 12. 18. 33. 45.
Okay, let's hold it there.
35. 33. 27. 24.
Are you okay there, Casey?
19. 18. 16.
We didn't move from the 38 position all that time.
15. 13.
Is it worth trying to come back a little right? Stop there. Temperature still in the teens there, Julie?
10.
Can you come up a little at all, Casey?
Still at 10.
Let's go left
14,
again.
25, 43, 89, 99, 107, 110,
What?
120, 125,
Does it look real?
87.
We have temperature of 127 degrees now.
Does that melt?
Perseverance apparently is paid off.
130.
Only once again we're going to have a fluid that's too hot for Julie to care about.
You can push deep inside the boat. Be fine.
Yep.
130, 131, 132. A lot of bad scans. Huh. Wow.
Sorry, that's too hot now, huh?
No, how hot are Ginger and the other one?
think one's 115 and one's 145.
Pretty well locked in there.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's take a sample.
Is this purging or?
We're going to start to purge, yeah.
What's that?
Oh, I'll use it.
Yeah, Julie, the other two, the Ginger Castle and White Castle, we had as 125 and 151 degrees Celsius, so it's in that range.
We're at 127 right now. Oh, it's got out of it.
No, it got out of us.
We're back in the 50s. Seems so disappointing now. It's all about perspective.
It's amazing how complex the flow must be. The temperature was, what was the maximum temperature you saw there? 130.
31.
So it got up to 131.
Here we go. We're gonna sample now. Okay.
Well, it's purged. Okay, I know it's
Starting. Well, the temperature does go down too when you suck, right?
1319.
But we weren't sampling.
This is port 1, yeah?
Super Port 1,
Yes.
dive sample 05.
Yep.
And
Now we're at 30. 100 degrees below where we know it is.
and the sensor hasn't, the input hasn't moved. That's partly it, but it's also if the flow isn't very strong, but it's at these temperatures, then when Chip turns on the suction sampler, he may actually be drawing in water alongside the, he's sucking in 4-degree water as well as the high temperature flow. So when he was purging, the temperature went down to 30. Now he's actually drawing the water sampler into the sample that has a bit more back pressure. He's getting 50 degree at the temperature sensor. So it's actively diluting the sample as it's drawing it, I guess, because the flow isn't strong enough. We saw the same thing much more pronouncedly yesterday at that 20 degree site where the flow was really quite weedy.
Would it fluctuate, say, I mean, if we weren't here, you get what it should fluctuate, would it allow more light or
What Nereus sample is this?
5?
It would probably go, I think, well, when people are doing DNA amplifications at sea in the laboratory, they cycle through the rising the temperature and lowering it down again and rising it and lowering it down again, and that stimulates cell divisions and reproduction. So probably it does the same thing here. We do know, and there are some studies have been done on vent sites that they can actually see when it's high tide and low tide 3,500 meters up, and that actually the rate of flow in and out of the seafloor changes daily with high tides and low tides. It's a crazy thing. So the water's basically being pumped up and down across the rocks. So the time's just come out for 9:25 here aboard the RV Falcor. We are actively sampling at a new vent site that we haven't sampled previously. Julie's drawing the first sample. We're collecting microbial samples here. We actually surprised ourselves. We knew this fluid was in the tens of degrees Celsius, but in fact as we got completely settled up to here, we're going to be sampling for the next 40 minutes or so at this location. The temperatures briefly went up to a maximum of 131 degrees Celsius. Where the temperature probe is now, it's fluctuating somewhere between 30 degrees and over 100 degrees on a regular basis as we're drawing these samples in. So we're recording the temperature continuously, and we're taking first a water sample, then we're going to start filtration after that. So that was the end of the first sample, which is the whole water. It was steady in the tens. It went up to over 100 degrees again right at the end of the sampling period. So we're getting ready to take our next sample without moving the inlet. We're rotating a valve at the back of the vehicle, and we're going to take another sample of the super sampler. This will be a Sterevex filter. Very good. Starting port 2. Time is 13:26 UTC. Sterevex filter.
Yep. With the bottles, with the Sterevex, it's dancing between 20 and 100.
Is it a peristaltic pump that pulses as it draws around?
No.
That'd be too much to expect.
A lot of bad hits on this.
So we're drawing another one of these samples.
We're around
Temperatures
99 degrees Celsius.
fluctuating between 20 to 100 degrees Celsius. So just a quick recap. We started the dive about an hour ago this morning. We came on site, started measuring temperatures in amongst these shrimp colonies hugging the walls of the north flank of the Damm hydrothermal field. The first site we went to, the shrimp living in a crack without any evidence of active fluid flow were living in temperatures just around 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, just a little bit warmer than the background temperature here in the North Atlantic at these depths. But the second site we came to, we noticed a dark patch in the rock that was exposed without any shrimp, but with a like an aurora of 5 or 6 deep shrimp all around it. When we measured the temperatures there, we measured temperatures above 50 degrees Celsius, and we've since found that actually at the very core of the site, temperatures are over 100 degrees up to about 130 degrees Celsius. So right now we're drawing a sample for the next 30 minutes, which is on the order of 100 degrees Celsius fluid that's being filtered to extract the microbes. So while we're taking this sampling, Julie is on track to come up with a name for this site. So if those of you who follow Jules Deep on Twitter, you can send in suggestions, and she'll see if you get inspired.
Parts of a castle.
Okay, those of you following Jules on the Twitter feed, relax. You don't have to be creative. We've gone through a very free-form thinking, inspired by the fact that Julie started off saying she was too hungry to think of something to name it, and we came up with Shrimp Buttery. So that is the name of this site until further notice.
And they, look at the name, look at the description of what the buttery was for.
What is the buttery for?
The buttery was intended for storing and dispensing beverages, especially ale. Water is not safe to drink and people drank ale.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because if Julie offered me a glass of wine tonight or a glass of this fluid, I would definitely go for the glass of wine. So there we go. Shrimp Buttery it is. Good choice, Julie. Nice job. So you know of like the kind of creative thought that goes into coming up with a name for a new event site. We'll take you through this idea. Jill has actually been naming some of these sites for a paper she's writing from when we were here a year ago. And she came up with a thematic trend of using medieval castle terms. So that's what we were working through, whilst at the same time remembering that, you know, not everybody had actually had the chance to get any breakfast this morning, because I got them all out of bed too early when we found these new sites. So there's various people looking hungry and waiting for coffee and stuff like that. So that's how we came up with the looking through a glossary of terms for medieval castles. we found out there was a thing called a buttery, which is basically where you went for food and drink.
I would believe
And
that.
part of it was actually, it turned out it was even better. Leighton pointed out was actually the reason that you had ale and wine in medieval times was because often the water wasn't safe to drink. And of course, when we're sitting here sampling these fluids with all kinds of weird chemicals in them, that's exactly what we're looking at right now, is water that's not safe to drink. So there you go. That's how minds work at sea. We don't always spend our time thinking about science. And we're quite the educated lot, but we're not afraid to use the internet and educate ourselves further as well. Because everything, remember, that you hear and see on the internet is true, including this broadcast.
Fashion Freak 123 says, "What are 17 parts of an medieval castle?"
So while we've been carrying on this sampling, we've also been carrying on our medieval education. All kinds of interesting things that I seem to have uncovered with the naming of this shrimp buttery site. Leighton, sitting on my right, has just given me a verbal tour of the Cardiff city and the castle there. And we just found out even more disturbing potentially is that Casey, while he was at college, built his own floating trebuchet. I'm fortunate to see it didn't actually mean it was one you could tow behind the ship and fire at people. And we'll come back to you shortly. We're finishing that that second sample from the super. Did you want to take a third sample here, Julie?
No.
Okay. And any other takers? Jeff, would you like to get... You do not want to get fluid samples here, correct? You don't want a sample here? Okay, let us retract the temperature probe, please, Casey.
So can we note in the log that during pumping, temperature was between 75 and 100 degrees C?
70.
75 and 100 degrees C. Done. Anything else?
T-max was around 130.
Now, Julie, would you like us to try and find another site while we're here, or are you happy to move on?
Let's go do the IGT.
So let's stow the sample, please, Casey, in the basket. Now, Jeff and Jill, would you like us to keep hold of this temperature probe while we're... So let's keep it over the basket, but keep hold of it while we migrate. Because we're going to go relocate and find somewhere else to go measure temperatures. Does that make sense, Casey?
Yep.
And we shouldn't leave it hanging out over the edge of the basket, because as Andy keeps reminding us, every minute on the seafloor is a gift. On the other hand, if we actually keep ourselves set up for next time we see somewhere that's interesting to measure the temperature of, we'll be in good shape.
Every moment is a gift.
So, according to our navigation,
So we put a target on the USBL fixes there for where we are.
yep. So that would actually put the high temperature sites a little back behind us, but I think the smart thing for us to do is to continue going uphill.
But we have depths on them, right?
Well, we have depths from last year, but we're not sure the two depth gauges are cross-calibrated. But the others were actually at the top of a hill, so I think we'll actually follow what we can see in our cameras. So I can see strong patches of shrimp uphill to our right. Yeah. And then there's something else, a promontory up that's tall to the left. So let's go. We bear a little bit to our right over those patches of shrimp. And then when we get to them, bend a little to the left. And we'll see what else we see. We're pretty much going to be at the right depths when we get there. We're heading southwest at the moment. So if we head that way, that would actually take us a little bit further west before we go south. So we're going to keep our eyes peeled now for high temperature flow. Just up the hill is probably about the right place that we want to be at. So you look for the flow that you think you like the look of, and you sing out when you see it.
What we'd like to go for is good flow.
Well, there's something just there. How about that? Right in front of you. So we have something there that's pumping away. You have two. There's the one on the left which has shrimp around it, and then you have one on the right which is bare rock with a white crack. So let's... Yeah. Jeff just gave the admiring tone of "that's a good-looking vent" in a tone. I remember in almost exactly the same sentence as we went to a geochemistry conference a few years ago when we were in Davos, and I think Jeff had gone hiking up the mountains before the conference started, and I went the last day afterwards, and we were discussing afterwards about how lush the greenery was up there and how well the cattle were, and I was showing Jeff photographs. He's just remembered the sentence now, and he said, "Yeah, those were good-looking cows." And it was almost the same appreciation that I heard just then in his voice. I'd forgotten that moment since 2008, and that was it. He's just said, "Now that's a good-looking vent."
Yeah, it's like it's created like this bowl around it. It's just
So this will be nearest sample 7. We'll be testing the temperature using the super probe to check out the temperature of this vent. So we've hardly moved any distance laterally. We've come about 1 meter shallower than the site we were at. And basically what we're learning is this whole hillside must be alive with fluid flow coming out of these, basically the same orangey brown rubbly minerals that make up the entire hillside. It's just a good-looking vent. We'll have to return to what this might get called shortly.
Get some port lights. Maybe a little hot zoom there.
So we're just switching cameras to zoom in on the mouth of this vent, and then we'll be ready to put the temperature probe in and see what temperature it is. So Leighton, I think it's time for our daily vent temperature sweepstake.
Oh, I can't go in there.
I think I will go for. What should I go for? I'm gonna go for 263.
Jeff and Jill, you both have to have 89.3. You have no choice. Because that's how we...
36. Oh, sorry, yeah, it's the one.
For 145.
196. Sorry, I mean, I was thinking of.
I'm gonna stick at 137 because it's got to come up eventually.
Let me enter these. 196. Jill.
145.
145.
If Brian Midson's listening in, he'd better email fast or else he won't be in on the sweepstake.
Casey.
72.
72.
No, 172.
170. Ariel.
160.
160. Mr. German, sir.
137, just on the law of averages.
It's not 172. Just like the other one wasn't going to be 120.
I'm reading off the temperatures here, so I can make it whatever I want. They've all been entered.
Okay, we're ready. Whatever Brian Midson sends in, we'll add 100. That's worked the last 2 days. So Brian, please send in 37 and then I'll be right. What do we have, Jeff?
11.
Hooray, 11 degrees.
Done. 76. 70. 83. 92.
Oh, too hot. Sorry, Jill, you can't.
107. 111. 117. 26. 31. 135. 138. 139. 140. 43. 44. 37. 38.
You happy with that?
Yeah, we can take the other.
So we stow that, and
Yep.
do you want to get an IGT there?
Yep.
Okay.
44.
Do you want to try the other one that's down to the left as well?
Between,
Since we've got the temperature probe in our hands?
Jill.
Or are you...
I mean,
It's going to be the same fluid, either one, so you're happy. You'd rather not know.
Jill must have had some background.
Actually, you know what? I'd like to know anyway. Since we're there, Casey, let's measure the temperature of the other one. Because if it is... Hmm?
Double or nothing.
Well, no, it's just if it's... Okay, yeah, double or nothing. We don't have to re-enter temperatures, we can just probe it. But if it is 89.3, then we may have to get Jill and Jeff arm wrestling to see who gets to choose which. Or maybe they get a bottle each.
You sample them, eh?
Sure, because it's a different orifice.
Jill won, she was 1 degree out.
What are you doing?
Wow.
PhD in this?
She's almost as... It's almost what she does best, right? But we know both her artwork and her beer tasting and palate are also things that she's very good at. But amongst Jill's skills is knowing everything there is to know about the vent fluids at this site. So is Jill high or low?
She was 1 degree higher.
Doesn't count.
Was that 145 then, and the max was 144?
Well, we're not done, 'cause we're going to take a sample.
Oh, yeah. Do you have bottle 8 on there today, though? Or is Sean going to be disappointed? Sean's not going to like it then.
45.
When in doubt, knock it down, make it hotter.
Go a little left. That's it.
54, 68, 88, 94, 98, 101, 108, 10, 16, 20, 20.
We should tell Julie about this if it stays at 120 instead of 122.
Jammed it in there, it'll be 144. To the right,
Of this same orifice?
122. Oh, it's over the limit of life now.
Only by 1 degree. Julie was...
123.
Okay.
Now it's way past.
So it's... Unsurprisingly then, if it's a meter away, it's pretty much the same fluid coming up the ground in 2 places. Okay, thank you, Casey.
123, yeah.
Was 123 the highest you saw there, Jeff?
Yeah. Okay, that was the end of Nereus sample 8.
Yep. Right. Get 2 bottles ready. So, Jill and Jeff, pressure's on you now to come up with a new name for this new vent site.
Buttery shrimp.
You can't just take other people's names and rearrange the words, Jeff. Do they have dairies as well as butteries? In castles? Where the good-looking cows live?
I shrimp stable. I do think we got to use bartizan because that just sounds cool.
A small turret at the corner of a tower or wall.
I don't know what this
That's not bad.
bartizan.
I think it's time we went for some free-form debate offline, and we'll get back to you shortly. Because you really don't want to hear our thought processes and how we arrive at these decisions. It's a bit too weird sometimes. So we've continued our research, and this new site is going to be called Bartisan, the definition of which is a small turret at the corner of a tower or wall, usually at the top but not always. And in this case we know we're actually at the northernmost extent of the Von Damm hydrothermal field, so that does pretty much fit to a being in the corner. And it certainly is. You can actually see this little chimney. It's actually rising, a local turret sticking up from the surrounding seabed. That's how we can actually see it. So it fits our description pretty nicely and fits with the theme of the other sites we've named in and around the Von Damm mound.
66.
So getting ready to sample our fluids now. This is IGT bottle number 4.
Sample number.
Dive sample number 909.
And it's IDG40.
That's correct. We didn't start drawing the sample yet, but we'll just check the temperature first and then we'll be good to go.
16. 138.
If you just hold it there, then I win. It's not that much to ask.
174?
No, 17.
Steady, boy, steady.
117, 125, 100.
Seemed like towards us, just inside the bottom left, was the sweet spot previously. What do we have there, Jeff?
91, 103, 130, 139, 142,
Let's just try and hold it there.
126, 117.
We're kind of holding steady there. A little left, maybe, Casey?
143.
Uh-huh.
Like a real sweet spot. 142. 140. 139. Okay, hold it right there.
Holding.
Did you say 140? 141. 142. Okay, I'm gonna.
Did you start sampling?
I'm gonna start. Way too long. Okay, here we go.
Okay,
Okay, it's not.
1406. And have we recorded our depth and heading at this site, please, Leighton? Oh, actually,
Do you have a huge
well done. In case people wonder, when we come here, when we're using our navigation to know where to come back to sites, we use this thing called ultra-short baseline navigation. Basically, we use a beacon on the ship. The ship knows where it is from GPS, global positioning satellites, from in the sky to the receivers on the ship. And then the ship has a pole with a navigation beacon at the bottom of it, which basically communicates acoustically with the vehicle. But the deeper you go, the bigger the error bars. With that, typically we can know where we are to within about 5 meters on the seafloor. But as we just showed, we have 2 different vents here that are only about half a meter apart from one another. And that the shrimp site, shrimp buttery that Julie sampled earlier, was another couple of meters away from there. So the definitive things we use are what the depth is and what the heading is when we're actually looking at a vent site. The trick being that depth sensors or pressure sensors have been around and very precise for a very long time, and so too is true for compasses. And if you actually approach the same vent site from the wrong angle, they can look completely different from one another. So quite often when we find ourselves wandering around in the dark trying to find a vent site, the smartest thing is to make sure we're actually on the right heading and at the right depth. That was the trick about 2 days ago when we actually were looking for Jeff's fluid sampler. We drove 500 meters through the seafloor, felt like we might be groping in the dark, but we at least set ourselves up on the right compass heading and drove at the right depth. And the same thing happened yesterday when we found the Twin Peaks vent site where we did most of our sampling. We knew it was a site we'd seen before. We knew it was close to the hot crack site that we found, the place where it was a rock that seemed to be split open like a hot cross bun. And what we did was look back to our notes and realize that when we saw the 2 on the same dive previously, we were heading along one particular compass bearing at one particular depth, and we saw the 2 within 90 seconds of each other. So all we did was from from the second of those sites, got ourselves on the inverse heading. We just basically spun ourselves through 180 degrees, drove forward, and then somewhere in the middle of nowhere, we found ourselves right in front of the vent site we were looking for. So just a few little simple tricks for deep sea exploration is when you do find something that's interesting, I always like to make sure we note down the depth and heading while we're looking at it. Because if you're ever looking for the same thing, if you're not at the right depth, you'll never find it. And if you're not on the right heading, it won't look like what you're looking for. So that's the first of our 2 fluid samples taken. And I suspect we're going to rotate straight into taking another sample of the same stuff. Is that correct, Jeff? We'll go for bottle 6. So bottle IGT4 is back safely in its holster, and now we're going to start getting ready with IGT6 and getting the second of these samples. So we're ready to start taking temperatures up to 140 degrees straight away. 140, I think 144 was the maximum on the temperature probe, and was 141 the maximum on the last fluid sample? Yeah, IGT6 and Nereus sample 10. It seems to be round to the left, resting up against the inside of the minerals. What do you have there, Jeff? Back. Yeah, I think you need to bring it back so the hose clamp is nearer us and just inside the near field. I think to the left, just up against the inside of that lip, is the sweet spot. What do you have there, Jeff?
27, 36, 139.
Oh, I know.
44, 45, 46, hold it right there. 143, that's good.
What happens if you push down, Casey?
Stable?
What do you think, Casey? He's not sure yet.
Nereus is stable.
Okay, we're going.
Sampling away.
Stop. Nereus 10, IGT6. 146.
Are you sampling?
Yep.
T-max of 146 so far. It's not the 89.3 they wanted, but apparently they're going to make do. Because that's a good-looking vent. And you notice that was bare rock when we arrived, but apparently the shrimp have come round to see quite what the excitement's all about. They hadn't realized it was a desirable residence till Jeff and Jill came in, started giving it fancy-sounding names like Bartizan. Yeah, the gentrification of the Von Damm field. Temperature still good?
Yep. 24. So we're all about here in the nearest team. Repeatability of measurement.
Oh, had a 147 there. Ooh.
Steady. That will cost extra for 147.
Yep.
If you go,
$1 a degree over what you specified.
if you go through above 150, Casey will put the bottle back down on the seafloor.
Well, if you get too much, the extra degrees are heavy, so you can.
Well, that's true, actually. There's probably a solubility issue there, that if it's actually a higher temperature, then there's more stuff dissolved in it.
Right, it's ballast concern.
So the time is just gone 10:15 here aboard the RV Falcor. That's the same as East Coast time in the United States. We are busy sampling high-temperature hydrothermal fluids from the seafloor at the Von Damm hydrothermal field. The chimney you're looking at right now is a new discovery we just made this morning, a site we haven't seen before. The fluids coming out are 144, 147 degrees Celsius, the hottest temperature we've measured just in the last few minutes. So it's above the boiling temperature for water at the Earth's surface, at atmospheric pressure. But it's not boiling down here because of the confining pressure at 2,300 meters. The pressure on the seafloor just here is about 230 times atmospheric pressure. These hot fluids are rich in a number of different chemicals, and particularly in methane and some other light hydrocarbon compounds. So these are samples being collected right now by using Jeff Seaward's gas-tight samplers for our student Jill McDermott, who's here in the control room with us, who's actually studying the composition of these fluids as part of her PhD thesis research. So that's the end of that sampling. We've had a pretty successful start to our dive so far. We've got good fluid samples for Jill for her thesis work. We've got some really nice microbial samples for our colleague Julie Huber. We're just switching out to our wide-angle field of view, so we dash the sampler away. And what we're just going to do now is actually take some time to do some filming of this site, and also we might do a little bit of camera maintenance. We have good focus control on our wide angle camera. We have a fixed focus at the moment on our narrow camera, and our engineering colleague Cliff thinks he can actually increase our capability of the zoom-in camera, so we're going to do that in a moment once we have our bottles safely stowed back in the basket. So I'm going to go find Cliff and call him into the van to come and do his engineering tricks. And then we'll get on with our camera work in just a moment. Okay, so just so you know, we're looking at the view through the zoomed-in camera. This is one of the two cameras donated to us by James Cameron as part of the donation of the Deep Sea Challenger vehicle. But we're actually just going to power that down and switch to one of our standard definition cameras, which is looking out over the field of view of the vent site we just sampled. And the reason we're doing that is that we had fixed focus, which didn't look bad to start with our James Cameron camera, but Cliff can actually play some fancy tricks which will allow us to actually adjust the focus. So we're just going to take 10 minutes sitting here to give him the time to get to work with through his laptop, working with the software on the camera down on the seabed. And so we're just going to sit steady. When it comes live again and we have the camera working at its optimum, then we'll take a bit more time to do some more imaging of the vent site. And then we'll be on our way to our next sampling site. We've been on the seafloor for a little over 2 hours, and we're very well along with our program. So we're feeling pretty good about how this dive is shaping up. It's 10:30 now. We have at least another 5.5, maybe 6 hours we can afford to spend on the seafloor today. And our battery power at the moment is 75%. So we've achieved 2 of our main objectives for the dive, and we're making good progress. So just stand by and we'll be back in touch very soon. Okay, just to let you know a quick update. It turns out that what Cliff's doing doesn't actually require us to turn the cameras off, so we switched back to this high definition feed because it's really pretty sweet view. You can actually see the chimney itself we just sampled that has the 140-degree fluid coming out of it. You can see it pumping away a bit like a smokestack coming out the top of a steam train or something. So that's hot chemically altered fluid. It was initially seawater that's then been pumped through the ultramafic rocks deep beneath the seafloor of these sites, undergoes chemical reaction with the rocks at depth, and then comes shooting back out of these fluids that we just collected samples of. The mineral of these chimneys in most hydrothermal sites, like the ones we'll be diving on for the last 2 days of our dive program, tomorrow and Saturday, emit thicker black smoky plumes coming out of the top of them because they're hot and acidic and full of dissolved metals. In this case, we have slightly unusual compositions at the Von Damm field. The fluids aren't so hot. They're in the range of 150 going up to 226 degrees Celsius is the hottest temperatures we've seen. And the mineral that's forming here, you can actually see, has this orange-brown crusty outer coating, but to the right of your picture, you can see this paler interior. That's where something is, a slab has sloughed off the side of the hill. And it's this pale talc mineral, basically. The fluids are in equilibrium with a magnesium silicate mineral called talc and with quartz. So that seems to be what we believe the entire mound is made of. And what you can see clustering around these vent sites are Rimicaris shrimp. These shrimp look pretty big in our zoomed-in camera, but they're probably only a few centimeters long. They do not have eyes. They have a little white patch on the back of their heads. It's a heat-sensitive organ connected to the same part of the brain as where the eyes are connected in regular shrimp. You can also see just below the chimney orifice itself, some small white dots. Those are little tiny gastropod snails. So if I had to guess, I would say those are just a matter of millimeters across. And what you can also see lying against the rock just above the vent and over to the right, in fact you can see two of them now, one in a crevice, one lying on the top, are zoacid fish. We believe these, well, we actually know because we've actually done some dissections on some of these fish, that they actually prey on the shrimp. I don't believe that these fish are peculiar to hydrothermal systems. The shrimp can only exist around hydrothermal systems or other chemosynthetic ecosystems, as we call them, ones where it's chemical energy from the Earth's interior that's lying at the base of this food chain. But we know that in these hydrothermal systems there are bacteria under the carapace of the shrimp, that those bacteria fix the chemical energy available from the hydrothermal field to convert carbon from carbon dioxide in the seawater and fix it as organic carbon for the bacteria and the shrimp. So the shrimp then become the dominant biomass that's actually being fed directly through the chemical energy. But then what we find out there are other than scavenger animals that live throughout the deep ocean, then congregate in large concentrations here. And in this case you can see that there are these fish in amongst the shrimp. The shrimp obviously are blind, they're probably not even aware those fish are there. And when we first arrived here on Friday, we were collecting about 100 of these shrimp for Max to study, to look at the lipids in the shrimp and in their bacteria, trying to understand what the organic compounds are. And we actually collected one of these fish was in amongst the shrimp, and we ended up, despite it swimming as hard as it could against the flow, it got sucked into our slurp sampler. So Cindy Van Dover then was doing a challenge for the rest of the scientists to see how brave the rest of us were amongst the geologists and chemists, that she actually took the dissected fish, opened its mouth up for us so we could actually take it in turns to be brave and stick our fingers inside the mouth of the fish to see how sharp its teeth are. And it really was almost like little razor blades. It's amazing that they're not quite as big as they look. Again, the fish mouth was only just wide enough for me to fit my little finger in. But it was indeed the case that those have very sharp little teeth that will bite in. So we're just sitting here watching the behavior, seeing whether we actually see any of the shrimp being cautious enough to get so close to the fish that they get a bite taken out of them.
It's all happen every 3 dives.
So that's good news. We've completed our engineering. We now actually have slightly improved focus control on the camera, but best of all we can control the exposure and light, and hence the amount of light in the imagery we're sending you. You're going to try and focus on the gastropods or something crazy? Can we pan up a little, please, Casey? Or tell me when you're ready to drive the camera. It's good. And can we go a little left? Okay. And let's just hold that. We're going to adjust the exposures. Yeah, well, that's brighter than we like. When we set up, we'll give this a sample name, yeah. So we've got ourselves a nice little field of view there. We're going to start this as a sample now. We can sit here and just collect 60 seconds of this material. And those of you watching live at home, if you see this in feature documentaries for a long time into the future, you'll know you saw it here first. That should be sample number 11 for this dive, I believe, Leighton. Do you agree? Sample number 11, Leighton? Good. Just wanted to check we were both on the same number. Time now is 14:36. Suddenly when we're doing operational work like this and moving from site to site, the control van empties out, the engineers are still here, Leighton's still here logging with me. The rest of the science party have gone walkabout. Did the vehicle just drift off there?
It moved up a little bit.
Okay, let's set the camera up and we'll cancel that as a sample name. Once we settle back down again, we'll go for see if we can get 60 seconds of the same field of view.
Was that the end of that sample? Or were you still
We're not going to count that as the sample because we didn't actually get what we wanted, but the vehicle moved, so we're going to reset up and then get it done so we can do that. Just, 60 seconds will do it, but we didn't want to go that far.
Is this right?
Yeah. And you can see the level in the green over there.
This is Jill McDermott, live at the Mid-Cayman Rise vent field. We're doing some videography testing, and I wanted to say hello to my family in Maine. My mom, Linda, my brother, Tom, and my aunt, Brenda and Kathy are all listening in. Miss you guys. I wish I was there, sort of. But we're doing cool stuff here, too. So enjoy the show.
So we're just going to try again to get that really nice pretty shot of the Bartizan vent site. As we were discussing earlier when we were taking Julie's sample, actually getting the vehicle delicately poised, hugging the side. I think you can see in the distance on this field of view now, you can see what rugged terrain it is. You can see the edge of the mound that we just took our samples from. You can see further mounds off to the right. Pretty much the whole of this hillside is on a 45-degree slope. What geologists refer to as the angle of repose. It's basically as steep a hillside as can be sustained by nature in the face of gravity. If things get steeper than this, then the hillside just starts falling apart. We know that the Von Damm spire is a near vertical structure, so basically this is somewhere where, as fluid is buoyant and flows upward, the minerals that precipitate around it do try and grow as vertical columns, and gravity then gets in the way and these things fall apart, but they basically make it about as steep a terrain as you could hope to find, or rather as hope not to find if you're an ROV pilot and you have an unreasonable chief scientist saying, please can you just park up against that, and oh by the way there'll be a bunch of turbulence from all the hot fluid coming out. As Casey said over breakfast this morning, I'm so looking forward to sitting next to you for the next 6 hours. So,
Well,
that was the end of that video survey. Well, not so much a survey, but a video clip. You probably got some appreciation there of how much subtlety goes into getting the really nice video that you see in documentaries. That to get 60 seconds of good video took probably about 10 minutes of preparation time from when we finished adjusting the camera. But on the rare occasion when you do get these things, we're very conscious that I think all oceanographers understand that communicating our research to the public is an important part of what we do. That's why some of you are, or so many of you are actually choosing to watch this live today. It's also an important part of the mission objectives of the Schmidt Ocean Institute, who are sponsoring our research. And of course, somebody who understands it particularly well is James Cameron, who's the person who so generously donated the cameras that you're watching the video feeds through to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution earlier this year. So we're very pleased to actually have these systems on board. We hope you don't mind persevering with us for the last 10 minutes or so while we got our little piece of clip from that brand new vent site nobody had seen before. The samples we just took for Jill, whose family we understand are watching and listening live as we're conducting our research. What we're going to be doing now is moving away from this vent site. Casey, I wonder if what we could do is center up on this crevice full of shrimp ahead of us. We're going to be heading out to the east shortly, so if we could rotate round, I think that'll bring us round to facing more to the south. Maybe we can fly up over this hill before we start our long trajectory. And what we're going to be doing now, yeah, and then we'll get the video as best we can from the wide angle field of view as we come up. So if we fly up and bend round to the left, we'll go up over this pinnacle. So again, we can see that's the Bartizan vent we just sampled right in the center of our field of view. But you can see this whole hillside is basically alive with fluid flow. You can see bare rock to the bottom left of your picture, but in a diagonal band mimicking the hillside from bottom right to through the center of the field of view and up to the top left. There's shimmering water coming out of the hillside all over the place, and the shrimp are clustered all around that. The highest concentrations are probably where there's a sweet spot, like a Goldilocks zone of temperature and chemical conditions, where it's not too hot but not too cold. The bare rock around the exterior, you can see little white dots. Those are gastropod snails. They're another species that are linked to the vent site. And what you can see now coming into field of view, I am pretty confident is a site we sampled in 2012 when we were here with pretty much the same science team with Nereus's shallow big brother, Jason. He can only dive to 6,500 meters instead of the 11,000 meters that Nereus can dive to. And quite spectacular features, these. And there you can see the very summit, and this is the site we've called White Castle. You can see us sampling a chimney down to the bottom left. It's really quite powerful in its output. You see a little black sulfide chimlet sticking out from the top. And then you can see fluid flowing right out of the top of this spire as well. So this is the sampling site that Jill had previously named White Castle, and then that little turret or promontory down to the base was the one we just found today called Bartizan. See a wonderful crack just on the top of the field of view. If we could look up a little bit or move up, Gracie. Then just from the summit here you can see this flat-topped summit, and then right down the center of it you can see a crack right through the mineralogy disappearing under the shrimp. And there's the lower view, the lower chimney just ahead of us there. And then I think if we pan away now, Casey, I think it's probably, if we come past here, we are facing southwest. It's time to turn away and head east. And we're going for rather a long drive now. What we're going to do, because we're trailing our tether behind us, we're going to fly out into deep water to circumnavigate all the way around the outside of the Von Damm mound as fast as we can in deep water. And then we'll be coming down to land down to the south and east of the spire, where we're going for our next sampling sites, the two sites of diffuse flow for Julie Huber, where there are also shrimp living nearby, which is an area that Max and Cindy want to get samples from. So that was a nice little clip of the seafloor. We'll be back on the seabed as soon as possible and back on with our sampling at that time. So for those of you watching or following our video feed online, we've started our sampling for the dive today at the northern side of the Von Damm Mound, which you can see at the top of the screen. What Casey and Mario are just working out is the most effective way to get all the way around the outside of the mound and down to the southernmost sites. We had some problems yesterday with our manipulator, so we didn't finish all the sampling we wanted to do there. So we've ticked off some of our first objectives from today. We're now going to get back to finishing up some of the objectives left over from yesterday, because this is our last planned dive at the Von Damm hydrothermal field, so we're trying to make sure everybody goes home happy with the samples that they wanted. We already got some very nice samples for Julie today, and we got some great samples for Jill for her thesis work. We're now heading back to get the additional samples that Julie most wanted from this program, and also while we're there we'll start getting some biological samples, some shrimp, and hopefully also some mussels for Max Coleman and Cindy Van Dover. And then we should have a whole happy bunch of PIs and scientists from this area, and we'll go and spend our next 2 dives at the Picard hydrothermal field. So right now there isn't much to see on the video screens because we're deliberately flying out in midwater, but you can see on the cursor that Casey is moving. Our plan is to take a long leisurely arc out over the deep water, and then we'll rotate through almost 180 degrees in total. We're facing east at the moment. We'll end up coming in, heading west-northwest as we approach the side of the ridge, almost 100 meters deeper than we just were. So one of the things we have to be very careful with Nereus, of course, is we are only connected from the seafloor back to the ship and then from the ship back to you, all hanging by a single thread of optical cable, which is only about 1.5 to 2 times the thickness of a human hair. So we have a thick conducting cable with a fiber optic core that actually hangs over the side of our ship. That goes down to 1,000 meters. And then there's another 2,000 meters or so of this single optical fiber that then connects from that depressor weight to the back of our Nereus vehicle. So one of the things we make sure is that we never actually drive over that cable throughout the course of the day. So since we want to come back to the north, then we need to make sure we get well away from the side of the hill now, so that we can then come back to this area, come back later in the course of this dive.
Question from those at home if we'll see more squat lobsters. Well, hopefully we'll see some squat lobsters at the next site. They might be interspersed with the other fauna that we'll see. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, and if we see any, we'll hollow out. We are now at a cruising altitude of 90 meters. It will take approximately 20 minutes to get to our next sampling location. During this time, if I could ask you to remain in your seats, keep your seat belts fastened, and enjoy the show. And a big hello for all those watching this at the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton in the UK.
So we're going to switch back from navigation mode to camera mode. We have finished most of our transit. We're now about 65 meters southeast of where we're headed to next. We're aiming for a site that's at a depth of 2306 meters. We've dropped down to 2366. Let me just check that. Here we are arriving back at the seafloor in pretty much our preferred location. We have about another 50 meters to go and we're pretty much at the right depth for where we want to be. We should actually be coming up. We might well see our X-18 site we saw yesterday, but we're pretty much on the right heading, moving in the right direction. And it is something like a 45-degree slope. So what we're doing now is changing our heading, so we're actually keeping the hillside in sight. So our heading is 313 degrees right now, so it's pretty much west-northwest. But what we actually want to do now is we actually want to head more to our right than forwards. We're pretty much at the depth we want to be, so we're just going to work our way along the side of the hill. We have about 40 meters to go, and then we're going to keep an eye out for the right features on the seafloor that we want to find. And so you're looking at our high definition down looking view, so you can see the front of the basket, but Mario, who's flying at the moment, is actually using 4 different sets of fields of view, and I'm using the same things, keeping an eye out for when I see the bright white, which will tell me we're getting close to patches of shrimp. And those are the flow sites that we're headed for here to the southeast of the Damm hydrothermal field. It's amazing how steep the gradients are of where there is and where there is not fluid flow. Basically the difference between the barren rock we're looking at right now and the area that we're going to is actually only 35 meters away, so it's about a third the distance of a football pitch. If you just landed on the seafloor here, you might get pretty discouraged. If there's any hydrothermal activity anywhere nearby, you'd pick up and leave again. And if you did, you'd miss out on 3 different hydrothermal fields, or different sites of activity that we know exist in this area, all within 100 meters of here in different directions. If you go north-northwest from here, there are the hot crack sites and the Twin Peaks site we sampled yesterday. If you go southwest from here, you get to the marker X18 site. And if you went pretty much due west or west-northwest from here, you get to the Old Man Tree. So 3 different sites. One of them we sampled extensively yesterday. It's the other 2 that we're heading to now. We are now at 2,374 meters. We're only 2 meters deeper than we want to be, so we're pretty much at the right depth for what we're looking for. Yep, and I think we can see some shrimp on the screen there. We still want to go north. I think north. We probably want to go more north now than any other direction. Some look like we're probably coming up on the sparse shrimp. I think those are mussel shells we're looking at right now. And on this heading, we're probably going to go over the Twin Peaks vent site before we get to hot cracks. Yep, plenty of mussel shells there. Pretty much. Haven't seen anything I recognise as a feature on the seafloor, but we're in the right place. So we're on rather silent running at the moment, that we're at the right depth for where we found things yesterday. We're just looking for telltale signals on the seafloor. The obvious one being any biological activity. That you can see it's fairly dark rock, dusty sediment. You know you're getting close to something interesting when you start seeing any biological activity. Is that something to the right, Casey? And it's like little white specks. Is that? Where would that be compared to where we think we should be? It's just that camera. It's whether that's real. I think I got fooled by that yesterday. That little colorations on the rocks. Yeah, I think it's just bright. It's artificially. Yeah, so that can't be right because it's not the right depth. Sorry, Mario, I steered you the wrong way there. So if we're facing due north there, we must be on the eastern side of this hill. So I would actually... Yep. Yeah. I think, yeah, if we're on a heading that's more like 340 and we're at the right depth, that's going to give us a good chance of finding stuff. And I think I'd be inclined actually to head more for the blue cursor, Casey.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, 'cause
I
if
think
we're
that,
running out here,
yeah, so I think going west from here is probably the better bet. Thank you. Okay, I would keep coming sharper, yeah, sharper west, because I think what I do remember now is that the sites that we're interested in, when you're going this way, it's just before you come onto sediment. There we are over on the left. Now field of view there. I think that's, is that just bright sediment?
a little bit more light per capita.
Yep. What's our depth now? 2371. By this reckoning, hot cracks would be dead ahead of us. I think we were at 2369 when we were at the Twin Peaks site doing our sampling yesterday. There's a lone shrimp. Actually, there should be a field of sparse shrimp here, so as we progress forward, in and around, all the way from the hot crack site to the Twin Peaks site, there were sparse shrimp, so when we start seeing them on the rocks. Plenty of these squat lobsters here. Somebody I think would be asking Leighton if we were going to see any more of them. I said there should be some down in this area when we get there, and sure enough, just as promised. I see a little patch of brightness, something white. Oh, actually, is this the fluid flow right in front of us? This is Twin Peaks right under the front of the basket now, in that field of view, so it must be coming up. So then if we get ourselves oriented there, Mario, then if we go northwest from that, yeah, because we were on 120 from hot cracks when we found Twin Peaks yesterday.
Off no distance or whatever. Oh, so yeah, Twin
Yeah.
Peaks wasn't on our route.
So if that is, I think that is Twin Peaks, isn't it? That is fluid flow we're seeing.
In front of
Just
us?
off to our left, yeah. Or is that just blur on the
There's blur
cameras?
on the cameras, yeah.
Okay, but anyway, that bright white, the bright white light in the distance should not be a submersible coming at us out of a tunnel.
That right there, is that a dinosaur?
Yeah, pterodactyl that crash landed. We're not the first people to fly over this area. Yeah. Now within error, it's hard to reconcile whether this is. Let's- Yep, we can see that bright white patch. Kind of dead ahead is where the highest concentration of shrimp are. We're hoping that's where there's going to be good active fluid flow as well. What's this just here? Just on our left side of field of view, we've got a little chimney just there.
Come down a little bit.
Would that, is that potentially, is that Twin Peaks where we were yesterday?
I don't think we were at Twin Peaks yesterday. I don't think we were. I think that was Chris.
You took the first sample yesterday, Casey, when the arm was being juddery. The high temperature site?
I don't remember at all.
I'm pretty sure that's where we sampled yesterday. We've just come at it from the other side.
Okay.
So we're at 2369 in depth. In terms of location, that's not bad. So yeah, if we turn on to a heading of 340 now,
340, you're right. And just in general, I try
or
not to
actually,
fly over
sorry,
these things.
300, not 340, sorry. Having trouble adding 180 to stuff.
I don't fly over the bridge really simple, and sometimes you'll get lifted up.
So hot crack should be just ahead.
You don't know that high. And then too, just so I don't drive into them. You have a tendency to just drive underneath more sometimes. There's another
This-
piece flow in front of us.
Yeah. So that one there, can you see there's some shimmering flow with shrimp? This is, yep, and that, but I think if we just come down at this site, I think this is hot cracks number, either 1 or 2. This must be hot cracks number 2, because I think we found them coming in from the, so there's some pretty organized flow coming up from amongst those shrimp, so if you're happy there, we'll stop and do some. Would you like to narrate? Are you ready for your public? You're going to give me a break away from the, Thank you, Julie. It's nice to get the headset off once in a while.
All right, this is Julie. Julie Huber taking over the microphone from Chris, who's been running the show all morning. Let's wait until the vehicle's set up. We are gonna sit down here and probe for temperature and hopefully take some samples of a newcomer to the pilot chair, Mario. Is helping drive the bus today, coaching from Casey. Your pencil. Oh. Did my pen just drop? No? No, it's okay. So we're here at a site that we named in 2012 called Hot Cracks. Let's see, we got in the water at 6 a.m. this morning, hit the bottom at 8 a.m. Those of us in the chemistry microbiology teams were up late, per usual, processing our samples and also churning them, our samplers, back around for the vehicle. The Nereus team was up late fixing the arm. Looks like they were successful in that endeavor, as we've already used it quite a bit this morning. And we're now back on the seafloor with shrimp. Yay, shrimp!
Oh no, you're sampling.
Oh, so
You want to be a pilot, you can find stuff too.
Mario just learned that not only does he get to drive the vehicle today, but he also gets to try to take a sample. Just no easy feat around here. It's a very rubbly topography that makes setting the vehicle down in a steady place pretty difficult at times. But he's got Casey next door coaching him through it. Future of deep submergence right there. All right, so we're getting the manipulator out to grab the super sampler so that we can take a temperature here. What was the temperature here last year, Chris? Okay. I think we did measure it, but it was, my notes have like 27, which can't be right.
Let me just see if I can find out.
Okay.
I think probably just saw shrimp. It could be so hot for you.
Okay. It can be very hot.
Yeah, very hot. Very low.
Yep. So Mario is using the arm to pick up the sampler. Again, he has got Casey Machado next to him, coaching him through this. It's his first time at the wheel of Nereus.
And I always double check that it actually touches.
One nice thing about ROV is that there's a lot of time for training. Mario's showing mad skills right now, according to Sean Silva.
Yeah, if you can pick up any sampler that's part of the jet ski ball team.
Hey.
And we've got Sean in here to help us monitor temperature. And now we play the temperature game, which is where we stick the probe in and we try to get the best temperature, most steady temperature, in many cases the highest temperature possible, to get the purest vent fluid possible. So we've got Sean in the back helping us with temperature. We're changing our camera to the zoomed in high def to help get the vent orifice, get the temperature probe in the vent orifice as much as possible.
Black area and see where the shrimp are.
Okay. These are hard fluids to sample. And just moving the intake of the probe a millimeter can pop you out of the probe. Out of the fluid, excuse me. I have not had enough caffeine yet. So I've mentioned before the Nereus arm, a wonder of technology. Has 7 functions. Has a shoulder, an elbow, a wrist, a hand that can twist around. And it does things like yaw and pitch, and those are engineering words. But all you need to know, it has 7 different movements, and they get used in combination to make the sampling that you're watching possible. These white shrimp are a really handy guide for finding flow on the seafloor. Those shrimp are positioning themselves right at the edge of where there's fluid, vent fluid meeting seawater, because that's a wonderful redox gradient where you have the reducing power of sulfur and the ultimate electron scepter, oxygen. And the sulfide oxidizing bacteria in and on these shrimp provide the organic carbon for those organisms to grow and thrive. These Rhomicaris are related to those seen along the mid-Atlantic ridge. This species of shrimp is not seen in the Pacific Ocean. There's a very strict, it appears, biogeography of vent fauna, and that's one of the driving reasons that we came here in the first place, to look for hydrothermal systems in the Caribbean Ocean. Caribbean Sea, I guess. Caribbean Sea. We're at about 25 degrees C right now, still climbing. I mean, I think it's probably much hotter further up that crack, but more important is finding a steady temperature.
About 26 and a half. 24, 23, 20, 18, 17.
Yeah, is it? It's really hard to see. You can tell with the shimmery flow,
Temperature's increasing again.
the shrimp.
16,
Can just see the shiny end of our temperature probe. And
17.
at the end of that temperature probe, we also have our intake nozzle for the sample. It has a long hose that goes back to a pump with 14 different valves or ports on it. Each one of those valves or ports is connected to another tube that then goes to either a bottle or a filter.
Above that is a sill, it's browny orange, so it's underneath that white sill. That should be where the fluid's coming out, maybe might like be a little bit of a hand.
You're going to want to swim the whole arm out and then using bridge the eye, and that way you won't be watching your own thing.
Doing a little bit of readjusting here, trying to find the hot point. We're using sort of minerals that we can see in the video to guide our decision. So again, we have Sean Silver from Hui in the back. He's yelling temperatures. And I've got Mario and Casey on my left.
22,
Mario's at the controls for the first time.
3 and a half,
Casey's helping him.
22 and a half,
The arm has a master controller.
24. Still increasing. 23, 22. 22 still. 23. 24, 23.
We're at about 24 degrees Celsius.
23 and a half, 22 and a half, 23 and a half, 24, 25, 26, 27, 27, 2, 27, 6.
How about down a little from that?
Increasing quickly, 26.9, 27, 27 and a half, 27.9.
Can you feel hard beneath you?
Yeah.
Okay. You're bumping up against something?
27.6.
The shrimp are really into the temperature probe.
27.5.
I remember that from last year.
Yep. Last year we actually sucked a shrimp into our fluid sample once. Tiny baby shrimp. Any slight movement changes their fluid flow pattern, and they're very carefully positioning themselves.
28.
28.8 is a new high.
So we're at about 29 degrees.
Can you get further right along that track? It might just drop real fast.
Well,
Or are you
27.9, 27.4.
if it's steady, we should probably.
happy with that?
27.3, 26.
I mean, I can't even tell where the
Go back to the
I can't even tell where the fluid's coming from.
in that track somewhere.
21.19.
It's about there and in is probably where it gets about 28.
If you can.
42 and increasing quickly.
Let's try hold it there, then they'll
Because
lead out
if you
17 more meters.
Right, right.
Tell you to stop, then
It's already gone.
27.6, 27.8,
Is it pretty steady there?
27.9.
Pretty happy with that in terms of stability, Sean?
Is he in one spot?
We're in one spot, yeah.
It's within 0.2 degrees, so I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, okay, let's lock it there. And can you grab Chip? Julie, can you grab Chip from the library? Library.
Yeah, that's a very steady. That is a very steady.
Rocksteady Mario.
Good job, Mario.
first sample. Risky,
All right, we got Chip Ryer in the room. We're going to start taking some samples. Sean, just let us know if you see a big excursion on the temperature. You probably will when we start running the pump.
This dive 61.
Yep, dive 61. This is Nereus sample number 12. And it's going to be bottle 3. Bottle 3, right? And are we calling this site Hot Cracks 2?
Yep.
T-max so far has been around 28 degrees, but we're holding steady around 27. That's why it's such a happy place for these shrimp. But in that 27-degree fluid, we're dragging microbes from beneath the seafloor that can live at temperatures up to 100 degrees Celsius, including methanogens and sulfate reducers.
How do you want this identified?
It can be just Nereus sample number 12, 061-12.
You're still on.
Chip, is it be a whole water or is there a
Whole water. What are we calling this? Hot cracks 2.
That's the name of the site.
That's what we named it last year. We must not have been feeling creative.
Hot cracks, but hot cracks.
It's the Hot Cracks area, and we sampled 1 and 2 last year, I think.
The two look sufficiently similar to one another and they're about a meter or maybe the other side of the same boulder.
Okay. So right now what we're doing is we're purging the pump to get any leftover fluid from the previous sample out of the line. And then we'll switch to port number 3 and fill a water bottle. And then we'll switch and fill a filter.
We're holding at about 28 degrees plus or minus half a degree, so that's a very good spot.
Great. Good job, Mario.
Seeing out it's not something.
Okay. And so, as a tradition, you have to drink the first half of the sample. And pressure.
New max T is 29.
New Max T, 29. What'd you say? What? Yeah, the camera looks a lot better. All right. Starting sample bottle number 3 at 1546. This is a 1 liter bottle, and what we do is we try to flush 7 times that volume through the bottle before we stop the pump to take a sample, just to ensure that we displace the water that's in that bottle. Everything we send down to the seafloor has to be devoid of air, so it doesn't burst under all that pressure. So before we deployed this sampler, we filled all the lines with very clean laboratory quality water. It's called Millicu water, deionized water. And we filled all the fluid lines and bottles and everything with it. So the first thing we do is we purge that water out of the system and replace it with 7 volumes worth of vent fluid and then capture it at the end.
Temperature's holding good at 29 degrees.
Really? Even with pumping?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and if you're tucked, he's probably out of, I don't know, microcurrents? Microcurrents for microbiology. I always think about life on a small scale.
Max T of 29.3, 29.4 degrees.
Great. We're at a max temperature so far around 29 degrees.
We're holding about 29 plus or minus 0.4 during pumping. For what?
So one of the many screens we have in the control van shows the battery power left in Nereus. Nereus is a battery-powered vehicle. Most remotely operated vehicles are powered by the cable that links it back up to the ship, but Nereus is a little bit different. It has batteries. And the way we deploy Nereus is we use a relatively thick cable to deploy a depressor weight. That goes over the side. And then Nereus goes off the A-frame, off the back of the boat. And then they travel together down to about 1,500 meters. Nereus and the depressor weight are connected through a buoyant cable. And then around 1,500 meters, we have a separation event where we break the two up using a fiber optic cable that's in a spool. One sits at the end of Nereus, one sits at the end of the depressor. That fiber optic cable is thinner than a human hair, but allows us to still have video and telemetry and be able to control the vehicle on the seafloor. But what it doesn't provide is power. So that's why we have batteries. And different things on the seafloor use up different amounts of battery power. So sitting here pumping with the arm locked in, not using hydraulics, doesn't use much power at all. All the thrusting and moving around uses up a lot of power. So for those of you who watched a few days ago when we were trying to take a sample from a 400-degree black smoker, that took a lot of power because we were constantly, even when we were locked in place, having to use the thrusters to stay in place. So the first thing they do when Nereus comes back on deck is start charging the batteries. So that's why we've been doing day ops. So we launch early in the morning. We go on the seafloor as long as we can, usually until the batteries get to about 25%, 30%? Okay. Well, okay. So depending how much power we need to get back to the surface. We don't want to recover a dead vehicle. We want to always be recovering a live vehicle, which makes recovery easier because you can actually drive it. And those batteries get charged overnight. And so that's very similar to how deep sea manned vehicles like Alvin or Shinkai operate. They also have batteries. Fun factoids about Nereus. I wish I had more fun factoids about shrimp, but I would need Cindy for that, and she's actually in the lab dissecting shrimp that we collected last night. So this project to work down at the Mid-Cayman Rise was actually originally funded by NASA's astrobiology program. They're interested in the origin and evolution of life on Earth and beyond, and also how do you find that life. And so we proposed using Nereus to help find that life, and then to study it and sample it and describe it. So we're probably going to be sitting here for about a half an hour, which is thrilling for those of us who study vent fluids, probably not that exciting for some other people. How's temperature doing, Sean?
Right now it's 27.5.
Perfect.
The lowest it's been.
So we're messing with the lights a little bit. Lights are another way we can save power. Turning down the lights when we don't need them. We are done with Nereus sample number 12, bottle 3. Yep. And now we're going to start Nereus sample number 13, which is Sterivex number 4. So Chip is changing the port over. And the difference between a bottle and a Sterivex is that the bottle is collecting whole fluid. So we're starting port 4 right now at 1553. Do you want to go eat, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay with you.
Yep.
The other thing that's coming up, Judy, is we're getting close to do our 4-hour restart. I'm going to send Jeremy up.
Okay.
And then you can
Okay.
give me the heads up about refreshing the browser.
Okay. So, lunch on the Falcor is served between 11:30 and 1. We let the crew, people going on shift change, eat first. But lunch is really fancy around here. It's really good. So, it's not to be missed. So, in the control van, we also go eat in shifts. What? I think I'll go grab lunch between the two sites. Yep. Yep, that sounds perfect. Chris and I are the 2 vegetarians on board. Oh, and Nathan? And Nathan? Is vegetarian as well. You can't be half vegetarian. No, you can't. You can't. Then you can't call yourself a half vegetarian. So what we're doing right now is concentrating microbial biomass onto a filter. And when we get that filter up on deck, we'll flood it with a preservative to stabilize all the nucleic acids. We're all made up of nucleic acids. You, me, microbes, dogs, trees. It's the code of life. It's the A, T, C's, and G's. And their unique arrangement determines all the genes and all the functions in any organism. And we use DNA to trace back the evolutionary history and the function metabolism of the organisms in these vents. So, for example, from the shrimps, Cindy Van Dover and colleagues have been looking at some highly conserved marker genes to try to figure out their genetic relationship to one another. And we do the same thing with microbes, but we're not collecting individual microbes. So unlike the macrobiologists who collect individual shrimp or individual tube worms, we are collecting billions of microbes, extracting the community DNA pool, and then looking at individual phylogenetic markers or functional gene markers within that pool. And the methods and tools that we use once we're back in the lab in Woods Hole are very similar to those used by scientists studying the human microbiome, the microbes inside or on your skin, inside of you, in your gut, in your mouth, in soils, in freshwater lakes. And what unites us is molecular biology, the ability to use DNA and RNA as tools for understanding how these ecosystems function. How was lunch, Jonathan? Was it good?
And then also fill in on how you're set up.
Mario set us up at this sample. He drove us here and set it up. He did a good job, yes.
We started at a trip already.
We're having a watch change by the ROV group here. Jonathan's taking over the navigator seat. Chris will take over the pilot seat. The reason your picture is a little bit dark is just because we've turned down the lights to save power. But our sampling intake is right in the venting fluid. We're holding steady around 28 degrees Celsius. After this, we're going to go over to Old Man Tree and do some more super and then slurp up some shrimp. So using lots of pumps on the seafloor today. Did you guys have lunch? What was it? Beef wrapped around a green thing. I suspect it has a better name than that. Olive log? Yep. Actually, has the pump slowed down at all? Oh, okay. The pump is kind of faster this year, so we've been sampling more like 20 minutes. Hey, Jonathan, do you want to talk on the microphone? Not really. Jonathan, what's your job title at HUI? Jonathan's a senior engineer at HUI. A senior engineer. Am I? That's what I thought. Jonathan, what's your area of expertise in deep submergence? Well, what would you say? I have my view of what you do when we come out here. Software, imaging, and navigation. So for those of Jonathan is one of the computer geeks. He's writing the code to make sure we are getting data back to help us find our way on the seafloor, make sure we're getting good imagery. Working a lot with James Kinsey. Chris, you're an electrical engineer, right?
Yes, research engineer, electrical engineer.
But your degree is in electrical engineering. And Chris came to HUI via Hawaii. It's kind of a long trip where he worked for the Hawaiian Underwater Research Lab, the HROV program, right? You managed it?
I managed the ROV.
Managed the ROV. That was a NOAA program that I don't believe is in existence anymore, right?
They're still there.
They're still there? They're still trying.
Despite fun.
Yeah. They have 2 manned submersibles and an ROV. And because of funding challenges, the U.S. government, they haven't been able to use them a lot the last few years, but they're hanging on. Having those assets located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean is pretty excellent. Because if you're a scientist and you want to write a grant to study volcanoes of the Western Pacific or South Pacific, it's really hard to get a ship and a vehicle that far away. And Hawaii is a good stopping point for doing those things. We do a number of cruises out of Guam, Samoa, and Honolulu, Fiji, Papua New Guinea. How's our temperature, Sean?
Holding at about 28 plus or minus half a degree.
28 plus or minus half a degree. Nice, solid, low temperature fluid sample. What? I'm not sure if it's real. I bet the end member here is 130, but that's why we have Jill measuring the magnesium, because that'll tell us. You can calculate a % mixing with seawater, but you don't really know if that mixing occurred above or below the seawater, above the seafloor. How's it going back there, Chip? You got your computer back?
Yeah, I got it back.
Okay.
We stopped for a while. Though, so
Oh, we did. Okay. Can you just note that pump stopped for 5 minutes? But then we restarted. Sean, what's your title at Hui? You're
Research associate.
Sean's a research associate. He runs, let's see if I can get this right, the gas chromatograph and mass spectrometer in Jeff Seawald's lab, and also does work just for various chemists around the department. Is that right? Sean helps me a lot. Measuring isotope fractionation ratios in methane, CO2. That helps us understand the origin of the fluids and the influence of biology or abiotic processes on the generation and consumption of a lot of the vent fluid volatiles that Jill and Jeff are interested in. Is he listening?
I don't know.
Oh, do you think he's listening? Do you want, here, you say hello. Why don't you see if he's listening? I'll text him. Sitting next to me is Julie, postdoc from the Marine Biological Laboratory. Her background is in deep sea sponges, and not only in their understanding their physiology and relationships to one another, but also the microbes that live inside of them. The sponge microbiome. And it's her husband's 35th birthday today. So happy birthday. Yeah, he must not have his software updated because it's going out green and it won't go. It has to go out blue, which means it's going over the wireless network. So earlier this morning we found a new site and we had a fun time trying to figure out what to name it. We continued our medieval castle theme. We named it Shrimp Buttery. The Buttery is a place where you would go for ales and wines. There also happens to be a cafeteria at Hui named the Buttery. So we thought it was a good homage to the Hui power behind this trip, as well as the medieval place to have a cool beverage to decompress at the end of a hard day of sword fighting. Or whatever it is. As we've learned, my medieval history is not very good. But we have vents around here named White Castle, Ravelin, Ginger Castle. We just named another one earlier in the dive. It begins with a D. What was it called? I don't remember. That was Nathan's choice. Yeah. But the way we name vents is we basically sit around while we're sampling until someone comes up with an idea that people find non-offensive, which is key, and potentially interesting. Clearly we were tired when we came here last year because we named the site Hot Cracks. which is an accurate description, but perhaps not very interesting. And sometimes we don't have time to name them. We just put down a XY location, note the depth, and then later when we come back to our notes, think of creative names for them when we have more brain power. So we're running ROV operations during the day. We're launching between 4 and 6 a.m. and recovering around 6 p.m. Takes the Nereus team about 4 to 6 hours to clean up and do checks on the vehicle. They're going to bed around 11 or midnight, and then they're getting up between 2 and 4 a.m. to begin pre-dive checks. So for those of you paying attention, that's not a lot of sleep. The science party gets their samples off the vehicle around 7. It's been taking us on average 5 or 6 hours to process those samples. We've usually been doing a CTD right after the vehicle's on deck. That usually comes on deck around 10 or 11 p.m. Going to bed around 1 or 2, getting up for pre-dive launch. We need to check all our gear back on the vehicle before it's allowed back in the water, or else Nereus will throw it in the garbage. But more importantly, if we're not there to make sure it's communicating with the vehicle during pre-dive checks, it might not work when we get to the bottom. So there's not a lot of sleeping going on, which means a lot of science is happening, which is what we all want. But it's not a pace that you can sustain for more than a few weeks. All right, so we're going to have to, we're doing this in 4-hour snippets. Your screen is going to go blank for a few minutes while we archive this 4-hour video, and we'll be back in a few minutes.